And then we have to do a little count up. So there's a little thing here to snip off and counting up, staying alive. Hope everyone out there is staying alive. You're still in the Kansas City area, right?
I actually just recently moved to St. Louis
Oh, okay.
couple months ago. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. Right up the river.
Oh yeah.
Okay, Old Man River. Who's the most puzzling player for 2020 drafts? That and more this week on the couch. Welcoming back now, regular, one of the first on the couch, Davis Mattek. We were all different people back then, Davis. Who are you having trouble getting a handle on right now, taking a strong stance on for our upcoming drafts?
So there are a couple guys that immediately come to mind. The first guy, though, because I think that he can be such a skeleton key to winning leagues this year, is Mccole Hardman. In the sense of, if you get Mccole Hardman right and he beats out Watkins and he's no longer just Tyreek Hill's direct backup, I mean, he could score 13 touchdowns. He could have 1,500 receiving yards. Like, sky is the absolute limit for a guy who's that fast, who plays with Patrick Mahomes. The puzzling part is, I mean, what if he just gets 40 targets again? What if Andy Reid says, you know what, you're a year away, kid, and we're paying Watkins for one more year. We have Demarcus Robinson here. You know, we still like Demarcus Robinson, what he gives us as a run blocker. And the weird thing is, though, and I've not heard anyone make this point with regard to Mccole Hardman, Blake Bell actually played a lot more than you think he did last year. He played about 38% of the team snaps. And what happens if the Chiefs just embrace Mahomes and all that he can bring, and they just go full air raid, pretty much like a Big 12 offense, 4 wide receivers, 1 running back. And, you know, I think in that scenario, even with Watkins healthy, I think Hardman can have just an absurdly crazy season.
Yes, and he was. I did something last week, Davis, like 11 players outside of the top 50 that could be league winners, and some of them need help, like injuries. I don't know if Hardman does, because as you're saying, you pick that number 40 targets out because that's about what he had last year, right?
Yeah, I think
But
41.
He had like five. I think was it 460
six touchdowns on 41 targets.
Yeah, and like 460 yards or something like that. So even just projecting him to 80 targets this year gets you close to 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns. And the thing I always like to bring up with Hardman is he's new to the wide receiver position. He was playing defensive back when he got to Georgia. What he showed already is extremely promising, and he could have one of those asymptote curves of development where once the light bulb goes on and the game slows down for him, he's teleporting around the field, and defenses are still focused on Tyreek Hill, and they're focused on Travis Kelce, and Hardman's going to get that matchup every week, the smash matchup. And it only takes 4 or 5 targets a week for him to be somebody that you're going to want to have in your lineup every week, especially now with leagues that have like 3 wide receivers and 2 flexes or otherwise where you're starting so many players. You can ride the ups and downs with Hardman. So I think you're right to bring up his range of outcomes is wide, but for his price, he should be almost an automatic pick. He should be going like in the 6th or 7th round. Like he should be going, or maybe all the receivers should be going like a round or 2 earlier than they are, at least because of the strange way that drafts are going. And Hardman also brought up something too, and someone said it was the special teams coach, but the Chiefs already said they're going to give Hardman a bigger role on offense this year, and that's why they signed like 6 undrafted free agent receivers, because they want to find somebody else that can do the returns,
return kicks,
so they can do that. So that all makes a lot of sense. Is there anybody on the opposite side? Because I was thinking about this too. Like, who are the biggest sucker bets right now? Like, I always think of like Leonard Fournette comes to mind right away, and maybe I will eat my words on this, but I feel like because we saw that item come out this morning about Le'Veon Bell. I can't remember which beat writer it was. I think maybe Rich Chimney, that they would potentially look to trade Bell if they're out of playoff contention. And I brought up Fournette and the Jags, and they're basically already out of playoff contention coming into the year. Is there anybody that comes to mind that you're like, yeah, every time I see someone take him, I'm just happy because it's an extra pick before my next pick that there's no way I was going to take?
It's like every running back in that range. I think Fournette, huge suckers bet. Le'Veon Bell, very likely to be a big sucker's bet. I mean, Todd Gurley cut by the Rams at a great expense to the Rams, by the way. It was not free for them to cut Todd Gurley, and they paid him $5 million, but that's it. They have no obligation to him past this year. Ito Smith and Brian Hill, I don't think these guys are superstar running backs, but you don't really need a superstar running back in that offense either, right? Because it's mostly based on Matt Ryan and Calvin Ridley and Julio Jones, and they trade a second round pick for Hayden Hurst. So I think there's a lot of routes where Gurley's getting overdrafted. There's one other. I think that DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor are maybe being a little bit overvalued. Now I see more ceiling for those guys just because Swift could show up to Lions camp and they could just be like, oh, well, we're just not going to play Kerryon Johnson. Like, Swift is too good. Or Taylor could show up and be like, this guy's so explosive. Like, we don't need to be giving Naheem Hines 20 snaps a game. We can give him 10 snaps a game. So I see it with those guys. But, Melvin Gordon, Leonard Fournette, Le'Veon Bell, Todd Gurley, these veteran guys who you're basically just like, you have to score 12 touchdowns or you're going to be so useless to me. I just am not interested in drafting those guys.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think there's been some good work. I can't remember who it was. Maybe it was Hayden Winks who put something out about historically running back 15 to 24 is just full of landmines. And it makes sense, right? Because it's the running backs that we push up the board because of the scarcity of the position.
You got to tell yourself a story for those guys, all
right.
of them.
And occasionally the story comes true because whether we're talking about Hardman, and you mentioned the rookies like Taylor and Swift, there is like this amplifying feedback effect where when players that are new to the offenses and have unknown upside start to make good on their opportunities, then that begets more opportunities. But it can go the opposite direction. I mean, that's what I'm worried about with guys like Bell and Fournette, Gurley, where when a team has a limited, in the sense of Bell and Fournette, I don't even know how we handle this, Davis. I can't remember the last time there was a starting running back for a team that we already know the team wants to move on from that player. Like, going into the season, they would rather not have the player on the roster, basically. But because of the previous investment, they basically have to. Gase didn't want Bell. Coughlin's gone. So, they weren't good. That was Fournette. That was his rabbi on the team, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So these are weird situations. Gordon, I still think Gordon has some decent game, and I think that he's going to be more of the pass-catching back than Lindsey. But I understand treading with caution there. What's funny is you didn't mention Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Because just the ceiling with Clyde Edwards-Helaire is so obvious. Even if he starts the year as Damian Williams' backup, as the change of pace guy, I mean, I don't even think that precludes him from scoring like 15 touchdowns or something, because I just like the Chiefs, first off, they're not wasting plays running the ball.
Right.
And, a target is worth like 3.5 as many points as a carry is worth. So, like, already the Chiefs are eliminating plays that are less likely to score fantasy points, which are going to be rushes. So just, you have to think on average, a Clyde Edwards-Helaire touch is going to be worth more than a Jonathan Taylor touch, than a DeAndre Swift touch, because it's more likely to be a target than a pass. And the Chiefs are, they're the odds-on favorite to lead the NFL in touchdowns scored. And like, it just, I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a good player. I don't think I know like Graham Barfield and some of our friends think he is a phenomenal player. I think he's fine. And I didn't love the pick for the Chiefs there from like a value perspective, but it should be pretty clear that Andy Reid really likes him. Patrick Mahomes literally texted Brett Veach, go and get with this dude. Yeah. Like go take Clyde Edwards-Helaire. And you can see from watching his film at LSU, by the way, why that would be the case. Like, it just seemed like he was always in the right place to get that check down, to get the yards that he needed, to get the first down when all of Burrow's other reads were covered. So like, first, he's been good in the air raid-esque system, which is kind of what the Chiefs' offensive game plan is. So I totally get it for why the Chiefs wanted him. And he just couldn't be in a more perfect position to just have an absurd rookie season. Kind of actually similar to what Miles Sanders did in the second half of the year after Jordan Howard got injured, but on an even better team with even more touchdown opportunities.
Yeah, it's the efficiency, right? It's the value of a running back touch, like being on the field when they call your number. I think both Edwards-Helaire and Damian Williams could be good picks. Like, if someone said, I took Edwards-Helaire in the late second, early third, and then I took Damian Williams like in the 7th or 8th, that can absolutely work out. Edwards-Helaire can hit with like 60% of the workload. And it can be one of those situations where maybe for the first 3 or 4 weeks, you're not sure what you have in Edwards-Helaire. Then Damian Williams stubs his toe. And then from the rest of the season, I can see Damian Williams being almost like a bizarro Jerome Bettis, where he comes in the red zone packages, maybe in like the hurry up offense, in those situations where it's even more important, the execution is more important, and everybody being on the same page. But Edwards-Helaire, probably what they had in mind for Hunt and Ware before Ware got hurt.
Yeah,
they can both hit. It's the beauty of the situation. Since you brought up LSU, are you fascinated? Are you like tugging on some strings on Joe Burrow and his effect on everybody in Cincinnati, or Joe Brady and his effect? I'm thinking about Curtis Samuel. I really want you to say something about Curtis Samuel. Just the wave, the LSU 2019 offense wave coming into the NFL.
So it is certainly in the range of outcomes that Joe Burrow could have a Patrick Mahomes-esque halo effect on the Bengals offense, where he just comes in and he is immediately so good that he turns all of them from being kind of afterthoughts into, just by the factor of being in this offense, you need to be considered weekly for fantasy. AJ Green could be a wide receiver 1 again. Joe Mixon could catch 50 passes and score 12 times. If CJ Uzomah is playing 80% of the snaps, he could be, like literally top 12 season is in play for him. And now I don't think it is likely. I think there will probably be some growing pains for him at the NFL level, because everything was so easy for him at LSU because Joe Brady, a great offensive coordinator, just set him up to succeed. Which is not what happened for Mahomes, right? Mahomes had a bunch of Texas Tech recruits, and if people don't know,
slappies.
Like Texas Tech recruits, like if you've ever been to Lubbock, Texas, getting elite athletes to go sign up to play at Texas Tech, it's not the easiest thing to do. And also, I think we have some evidence that Cliff Kingsbury really understands some things about play calling and football, and then really doesn't understand some other things about play calling and about the game theory side of football. So not the easiest one-to-one setup for him there. And, I maybe have like a little bit of concerns about the fact that Burrow is 23 years old and was dominating guys who were all, in some cases was playing against legitimate teenagers. But I am excited to see Joe Burrow in Cincinnati. Weirdly enough, the guy that I am least excited about that other people seem to really like is Justin Jefferson. I know he was phenomenal last year, but I'm worried about some of that halo effect from playing in that offense and playing with Joe Burrow for him. If Justin Jefferson just becomes a Jason Avant style possession wide receiver or whatever, I'm not going to be like mega shocked by that, I don't think.
Yeah, well, it's a similar situation to say Christian Kirk. And I was more in on Christian Kirk from a dynasty standpoint last year than maybe I am at this time. Because what you have is somebody that's a very competent receiver, but not somebody who has like a real hot zone or dominant zone in their game. So Kirk in an Arizona offense that may have a larger passing pie was more exciting, although now that passing pie could get divided up into more pieces, where Justin Jefferson's going into an offense where it's going to be small to begin with, and then there's so much overlap with what Adam Thielen does well. I just think Adam Thielen's going to get like 160 or 170 targets this year. It just seems
totally.
to me.
Yeah, it could happen.
And then where you're going to be happy to have Jefferson is whenever Thielen rides into the sunset, but who knows when that will be.
Gets banged up or retired.
Right.
Yeah.
Because that hamstring last year was kind of the aberration. Now, once a player goes from being durable to injury prone, sometimes it takes us 2 or 3 years to go back and say, oh, that was the point that it happened. Right? Is it going to happen with T.Y. Hilton? Is it going to happen? Has it happened already with AJ Green? Like, these are some of the questions we're asking ourselves in drafts. But when you mentioned Burrow and the halo effect, one of the players, and I'm not sure what to do with this, but one of the players that you should at least be thinking about, right? Because I brought up the puzzling thing, because I think this is the time in the fantasy football calendar where you're focused more on what you don't know than what you do know, and trying to figure out how you want to resolve that for the people that are looking to you for advice. It seemed like Joe Mixon has been paddling upstream his whole career, right?
Yeah.
So if Joe Burrow just changes it from like upstream to calm waters, not even like any rapids pushing the offense to heights, but just making things functional and work, we could look back. Like I can picture a scenario where 2 or 3 games into the season, we're all like, why didn't we take Joe Mixon in the top 5? Like Joe Mixon should have been in the conversation with Kamara and Henry and those guys because we know he's good. He's just been having to navigate Cincinnati. Speaking of the fantasy football calendar, Davis, I'm going to take a total left turn right here and say, because it is kind of because I know, and I've been watching it, and this was a really exciting weekend to even get a contact buzz from all the PGA DFS folks out there. And I know that you're like, we've been there all along, right? But now with not much else going on. Yeah. So, I mean, make your pitch, man, because I know that if PGA DFS could have a spokesperson or otherwise, if they were looking like they should be paying us right now for what you're about to say, right?
Okay. So I totally get the idea of like, dude, golf is only for stuffy old white folks. Like, who cares who's watching this? And I totally get it, right? Like I have the counterculture. Like I have forearm tattoos. People look at me weird when I walk into golf courses sometimes, you know what I mean? But so the first thing is golf is great. I think it is a great sport. It is so zen. It is so about the ability of the mind to conquer the body, of not allowing your emotions to get the best of you. Like, so just as an activity, I will stand up for golf that, for people who think that it's stupid or whatever. But golf betting and golf daily fantasy, I mean, it is a rush uncomparable to pretty much anything else. And it's very hard to simulate it with other I would really compare it to like that feeling in fantasy football you get when you pick up a wide receiver off the waiver wire because you have 6 dudes on bye and hurt or whatever. And so you go to pick up Auden Tate off the waiver wire and you're rewarded with a 2-touchdown, 8-catch game. And like getting the winner right of a golf tournament is very comparable to that. And it's also very sort of similar. It rewards skill sets of being able to figure out what is noise and what is not noise, and really is going to reward the ability to suss out useful information versus total, non-useful, non-actionable information. I totally think it's one of the best sports in terms of, understanding what data is useful and what isn't.
Well, unlike football, you're talking about one discrete set of skills and abilities.
Yeah, totally.
And it definitely makes sense that if you understand a course, and it can be just as simple because they have an annual schedule of just looking back at previous years' fields and how they finished, that you can say these players are better suited to play on this course.
Totally.
Than these players. And then you have momentum coming in and things like that and how it becomes perplexing. But it seems like it's something now that, like you're saying, even if you don't specifically appreciate golf or the culture around golf, that it can be an excellent puzzle. It's just like I say about fantasy football when people say, because, you have the purists out there, Davis, who are like, PPR.
Yeah, totally.
I'll never play in a PPR league. That's not worth anything, but it's just a puzzle. It's just like add different things to the puzzle.
Yeah, it's totally a puzzle.
Yeah, and it's just given this information and this information. I mean, it's like reminds me when my dad taught me to read a racing form when I was 8 years old. And like you said, some of it is you think, oh well, when this horse is running, a mile and less, he's a fast starter. But then you find out you're wrong anyway. But I love what you mentioned about golf as a sport, because I've actually been getting back into disc golf. We should all be getting outside more now. I mean, I know.
Yeah, all my exercise now is outside. I'm not going to the gym, so I'm, going skateboarding or going golfing or just trying to do something out. Going running with my dogs or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a wonderful exercise because you have to train yourself to not think.
Yes.
At the moment of a decision, your mind has to be vacant, like the wind is blowing through it. And it doesn't matter whether it's like darts or pool or bowling. All of these sports focus on that. Archery is then in the art of archery. And they all ask you to train yourself to not think. Because like you said, emotions or thoughts.
Don't think, just do. Because if you're sitting there, I mean, I've played disc golf or regular golf or whatever. If you are actively thinking about what every part of your body is trying to accomplish, like it's just gonna be a stone cold mess. So like that, to me, I think golf is one of the most meditative things I do, for sure, because it's just all about trying to get your body in tune with the motion you're asking it to do.
Yeah, it's like you pick up the stick or you hold the disc in your hand and you're like, use this thing to put this thing by that thing out there that you can see. And if you think about it too much, then you're like, one thing I've noticed is if I'm looking at a tree that I want to avoid when I'm teeing off on the disc golf course, if it's the last thing I look at, if it's the last thing I look at and I think don't throw it there, then I throw it there. Right.
100% of the time. It's no doubt.
It's a really interesting exercise, but I'm glad that you gave people that, let's eliminate the taboo. I don't think there's really a taboo about it, but also just the way people are getting really excited about it. I think it was somebody from Pat Mayo's show that won the Millie Maker this time.
Yeah.
And everybody, the last couple of tournaments, I've just seen a lot of people doing the sweats and otherwise really enjoying I think even the NASCAR race, there's been a lot of different stuff going on with NASCAR. The finish of the NASCAR race and people getting into NASCAR DFS.
Yeah, I think baseball is going to look back at this moment in time and be like, damn, we really messed up. We let golf overtake us in terms of the American national consciousness, which is, I'm sure, a sentence Rob Manfred never thought he would have to think, but I sort of see things going in that direction.
Yeah, it is. I mean, and what's wild too is that some of the players, I think Trevor Bauer has been the most outspoken. The players are almost narrating the downfall, and we'll see. On the other hand, baseball gave us the strongest union and first breakthrough, and maybe that's part of the residue for this, and baseball will get it figured out. But meanwhile, we still have a lot of things to pay attention to, and for now at least, the PGAs. Do you dabble in any? What else, like, since it is that sort of dead time in the fantasy football calendar, what else are some side pursuits or other things you're paying attention to in DFS, or is it just PGA right now?
Oh, all the stuff, man. Everything.
Korean baseball?
Soccer is the big one. Korean baseball. Yeah. Of course, has given me some more time to get some money in the stock markets, just playing cards online, just because that's just my brain, my brain is so wired to the input, but also the serotonin of you won money, you lost money, you speculated correctly, you speculated incorrectly. And there was that stretch of April where we really had nothing was a wild time for a lot of us who are just of a speculative frame of mind when there was really no sports going on at all.
We needed the coronavirus betting markets,
Yeah,
this number's going to go up or down. I bet they had them somewhere in Europe. Like, Europe's way ahead of us on just being able to bet on anything at all.
That is true. Yes, that is very true.
And we're still going to get to that point. It circles all the way back around, right? Because again, I talk about my old man. And going to the track with him when I was a kid. But you also got introduced to those things like baseball. This is what's going to bring back baseball, Davis, is all that stuff where you bet on every play, every pitch, like all the systems where you sit in the stands. You know what I'm talking about, right? Where there's all these games, these side bet games. In a baseball game, you can bet on any number of things, pitch by pitch, with your friends sitting up in the stands. And we just need apps to capture that. And then we'll be off. And I'm trying to figure out how to gracefully steer us back into football after that talk. But I really wanted to address that just because I see it, right? It's one of the interesting things about social media is you can really watch the mass consciousness, the ripples through the mass consciousness. Totally.
Yes. 100%. Yeah. I think that that's been a great observation throughout this quarantining isolation period is you can kind of see what you can see what the moment is. You can see what is capturing people's attention in a very organic way because people are just sort of going from this to that based on whatever's capturing their attention at the moment.
Yeah, obviously the old interesting times curse. Okay, we'll circle back around this way because we're getting ready now. Like, I'm going to do a Pros versus Joe's Dynasty startup, Best Ball Superflex Dynasty startup in 2 weeks. I'm watching the one that Curtis, Patrick, and Sean Siegel are doing just to get an idea of the lay of the land. Pros versus Joe is also coming up, the FFPC format. We're going to have all kinds of expert leagues starting up soon.
Oh, yeah.
So, and I'm not asking you to give away all your secrets, Davis, but what are some of the hallmarks, some of the things you have written down in pen, whether it's how you're approaching a position or some players that you know are going to be part of your plan, or a strategy that you know that you're not going to take no matter how enticing it looks? What's going to be the hallmarks of the Davis Mattek strategy this year?
Well, the first hallmark is just get a top 5 pick in your draft, and
Yeah, right.
if you don't do that, things get a little bit tougher. But that top 5 pick, that means you're going to get Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Alvin Kamara, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook. If you are not scared of the contractual stuff, I'm not super scared off. Like maybe I would, and I, by the way, I mean, I kind of think this Miles Sanders in the top 5 stuff is. I'm not running away from it. I have not been in a position yet where I've been forced to choose, and I'll see how I really feel about those things if and when I'm picking at 5 and I have to pick between Cook and Sanders. I just have not quite been there yet. So that's the first thing is really try and get that pick, because that sets up the rest of your draft in a very easy way. If you don't pick in those top 5 picks, that means, okay, am I going to go in on Joe Mixon? Do I take Derrick Henry at the 8th pick? Do I take Josh Jacobs at the tail end of the first round, just because I am so desperately not wanting to target those trap running backs that you and I were just talking about? And we really want to have a pass catching running back with some touchdown upside with our first pick. That really is the goal. Some of the other staples this year, definitely going to be, I am probably going to be taking mid-round quarterbacks in a lot of my, like in the FFPC main event, Football Guys Players Championship. Certainly in my pros versus Joe's draft, I will be trying to get Dak Prescott, Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson. I think that this year more so than other years, because we actually now have and have nots at the quarterback position. Whereas, in years past, it was kind of like not really that much of a difference between QB4 and QB18, especially if you're streaming them. But with a select number of guys now actively adding running to their upside, we actually are in a situation where you kind of need that weekly upside. And you definitely need that upside if you're trying to win, $500,000, or trying to win pros versus Joes, or trying to win the Scott Fish Bowl. Like, I think it's going to be very hard in those formats to actually outdo Mahomes and Lamar and Dak and Russ and Kyler. Like, I think those guys are really hallmarks of a winning strategy this year.
Yes. And I said at some point last year that if you start to think about it, and this is good old Joe Bryant, BBD, it's about the value, the gap between your option and the replacement. And I think because the replacement level at quarterback is 15 or 18 points a game, it makes you think, well, I can just take an easy 15 or 18 points and wait until the 15th round. And look, like we mentioned Joe Burrow. I mean, we may look back and say, if you waited on quarterback and took Joe Burrow.
Yeah, Joe Burrow has a little bit of running upside too. I mean,
right.
He scrambled a little bit while he was at LSU. He could run for 300 yards, yeah.
And you can't ignore Ryan Tannehill. You can't ignore if Ben Roethlisberger's elbow is sound at the price. So and really the answer is this: take your early mid-round quarterback, because I even think this mid-second to third is a kind of a dead zone where I'm not talking people out of taking Lamar Jackson or Patrick Mahomes in the second, or Travis Kelce or George Kittle, because as we're talking about, like, wide receiver depth goes on for a while, and then also take Joe Burrow late, right? This is where you can really, and then if Burrow is awesome, you can trade your Dak Prescott, trade your Lamar Jackson, and if he isn't, well then so don't let people get away with it, right? Like, police both sides of it. Get one of those early quarterbacks to lock in a pretty big advantage, and one that could get bigger. But out of the have-nots, it's really easy to tell the difference between, Kirk Cousins or even someone like Jared Goff, where you're going to play them when they're playing bad defenses, basically.
Sure.
And that's it. And then you're going to have somebody else. So those don't offer that upside. So I like that. I like the idea that, and JJ was on the show like a month ago or so, and he's saying, hey, it might not be a late round quarterback this year.
Yeah, he was the one who did the math. I'm just tailing off of JJ's math for this, for sure.
Right. Well, because who else can offer you, especially, and I think this comes back around to like basic 101 fantasy football stuff, Davis. Like, know your scoring system, right? Because for those leagues that have bonuses for long touchdowns, I just saw a stat today that Mahomes has thrown 30 touchdowns outside of the red zone, which is the most in the league over the last 2 years. And Prescott had 24, and that number is going to go up. So, knowing your scoring system and knowing how the fishbowl, Scott Fishbowl's coming up, and that's definitely a system that is going to create wider gaps between the haves and have-nots at the quarterback position. And you can definitely take advantage of that. And then the poor top 5 pick thing. And like you said, it's the thing that's going to keep you up at night. Like if you draw pick number 8, like you said, am I going to take Derrick Henry? Am I going to take Joe Mixon or Nick Chubb? Am I just going to bite the bullet and take a wide receiver that I know is going to be in the top 5, but it might not be much.
So then, you take Michael Thomas, you take Devontae Adams, and you're like, man, I really, really better get James Conner in the third round. Because if not, then because Conner is the one who I'm like, you know what? They're just going to use him. Anthony McFarland year 1, they're not turning over the reins to him. They tried Jalen Samuels, they tried Benny Hill, they tried Trey Edmonds. Those dudes did not work out last year. And so Conner is the one I feel really good about, where if you get him, I think you can start wide receiver, or Kittle or Kelsey, whatever. Yeah. But if you don't get him, I mean, dude, it just gets so thin.
Yeah, well, you're hoping for David Johnson to stay healthy, or you're looking at David Montgomery and hoping that he becomes a much better player than he was last year, or maybe Chicago's offense comes alive. Connor's an interesting one to bring up because I think you're right to highlight him. One of the pieces I want to do this year, I never get around to writing like 1/3 of the stuff I actually want to write, is just looking back at 2019 ADP and looking at ADP right now, because James Conner was a late first-round pick.
Oh, yeah.
And now he's a third-round pick.
And he was good when he played.
He was, even though Ben Roethlisberger only played for a couple of games. Although Conner wasn't as good of a runner as he was. I wonder about the Steelers line without Munchak. They weren't. One of the things we're going to learn about the Steelers, assuming Roethlisberger's, this is near and dear to my heart.
Oh, yeah.
Roethlisberger's arm, as long as his arm is sound, how much of what went wrong with that offense was because he wasn't out there? And not just he wasn't out there, but they had the worst quarterback play. I mean, they had the worst quarterback
so
play.
Bad. So bad.
It was really, really hard to watch. And then does that make everything just open right back up for James Conner? And now all of a sudden we're back around to, well, why were we targeting him as a late first-round pick last year? And certainly Conner is a dude that's going to leave it all out there. He's gotten bigger. I don't know if I always like that when running backs get bigger to stay healthier. And then we'll see. I still find myself fascinated with Jalen Samuels. Here's the story I'm telling myself about Jalen Samuels. Rookie year Jalen Samuels is the real Jalen Samuels. Last year, and there was that Wildcat game that he did well, but once he tweaked his knee, he wasn't the same last year.
Totally. Yeah.
And I'm curious, and there's a name people should know out there, Matt Canada. And when he was with Pitt, they actually had a great offense. And then he most recently was at Maryland. So there's the Anthony McFarland connection. So he coached Anthony McFarland. And I want to say there's like a consultant part of his role. He's the quarterback's coach, which Steelers didn't have because they promoted the quarterback's coach, Finkner, who's one of the worst offensive coordinators in the league.
Oh, yeah.
And just didn't hire a quarterback's coach. But if Canada, because Canada likes pre-snap motion, Canada likes doing 21st century kinds of things with the offense. So I'd be curious if they incorporate more Samuels. I'm curious how they incorporate McFarland and Benny Snell. I mean, he's the dude leaves everything he's got out there on the field, but it was just a terrible. I feel like the Steelers going from Snell to McFarland is kind of like when they went from Jarvis Jones to Bud Dupree, we blew that pick, so let's go all the way to the other end of the spectrum and
do anything else. Yeah.
Right. So we'll see. But I think you're right to highlight Conner as one of those running backs that and this is what drafting's all about. It isn't necessarily having a rigid plan. It's just knowing as your draft progresses, oh, now that this happened, I better open up.
Now I got to do this.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. There's so many wide receivers, man. I mean, there's so many wide receivers. This could be a year when everybody's right about the wide receivers they took.
Yeah, you can be sitting there in the 16th round and be like, well, I'm not going to be surprised if I get startable games out of N'Keal Harry or whatever.
Deshaun Jackson.
Yeah, totally, 100%.
But even like the fifth, I don't even know how to, because I'm trying to, what I'm trying to do, Davis, in this league, and somebody already beat me to it because they traded their first, which was 1-1, and like 17th, 18th, and 19th round picks for 3rd, 5th, and a 6th. Because I would be fine in a dynasty startup now if I didn't have a first or a second round pick. Yeah, and just sitting in the middle rounds and just picking off like Terry McLaurin, Calvin Ridley, because this draft is about to make the turn into the fourth round, and barely, I think like 6 or 7 wide receivers have gone. Partially because of the Superflex format and the tight end premium in FFPC, but also it's because everybody's looking at the wide receivers and thinking
and being like, I'll get a guy I like later.
Yeah, and the round after that, I'll get a guy I like, and the round after that, I'll get a guy I like. But who are a few of the guys that you like among all those guys that we all like?
Well, the position that I'm taking the hardest stance on, I think, relative to the market is right now I have DJ Moore ranked as my wide receiver 5, I believe, and my 13th overall player. And pretty much every draft, 3rd round, DJ Moore, assuming I have one running back that I like at that point and I don't have to take Connor. DJ Moore is pretty much the auto click button there, just not really having to think that hard about that one. He was wide receiver 7 last year when he got injured, and that was in a super non-functional offense where they gave just every time they had a touchdown opportunity, they were trying to get Christian McCaffrey the ball. Like the whole premise of that team last year was, we're not going to win games, so we might as well get Christian McCaffrey as many stats as we possibly can to make it a memorable season of some variety. And we just talked about it, right? Joe Brady, tell me things aren't going to be better for them this year. And Teddy, you and I are both long-term, Teddy can play guys.
And Joe Brady knows his game. They were together on the Saints team 2 years ago. And also, I think the move of going out and getting Robbie Anderson, it shows me a willingness to be aggressive. And also probably embracing the game scripts they're going to have. So, get the ball out of Teddy's hands quickly. And I hope that they use, and I understand why DJ Moore would be the guy that's glowing white hot in this analysis, because he's the guy that is going to get open early in his routes, and he's going to dovetail perfectly with this. I still want to keep hope alive for Curtis Samuel, and I know that Brady said that Samuel was crucial. I think he was crucial to the success of the offense. He's really good. Probably not as good as DJ Moore, but has a lot to offer. But Carolina in general is a
I didn't really like Curtis Samuel last year because he was being drafted as a guy who was going to compete with DJ Moore for like the team lead in targets. And I didn't buy that at all. Where he's being drafted now, he can get 40 carries, 85 targets, and you're doing cartwheels with that. You're like, wow, that's a really appropriate role for him to be playing in the NFL. And the price tag is totally appropriate. Like, it really shouldn't surprise anyone if he earns a larger share of the offense than Robbie Anderson.
Yeah, Anderson is more, I think what you want is in a chess, kind of like how the Rams used Sammy Watkins, right? Like if Robbie Anderson just cancels out the number 1 corner, like he cancels out Marshawn Lattimore. Marshawn Lattimore just follows him all over the field and blankets him, and Anderson gets 1 or 2 targets. But meanwhile, McCaffrey and Samuel and Moore are just zigzagging through the offense, and they're matriculating the ball down the field so easily. Then Anderson has done his job and he's earned his money, even if it doesn't show up in fantasy football stats. And I like how you brought up the carries for Samuel too. Josh Norris put something out about, I don't remember exactly what it was this morning, but
I just saw it. Which is that let me go find it because it was good. I gotta go find it.
Yeah, and I'll just say what I tacked onto that was that Samuel got 9 carries in the last 4. I think it was Scott Turner in the pass catching running backs.
Yeah.
That's every Scott Turner, Norv Turner offense has had a pass catching running back. And even though it's not JD McKissick, right? So I said Antonio Gibson. I mean, like the 17th, 18th, 19th round, I'm going to throw a pick at Antonio Gibson, but also partially because Curtis Samuel got 9 carries in the last 4 games after Scott Turner took over the play calling last year. So there's a willingness there to use these talents. I mean, that shouldn't be a coincidence, right? It shouldn't be a coincidence that Scott Turner, whenever he got to control the play calling, gave Curtis Samuel these opportunities. And then when Washington didn't even have a 2nd round pick, so they had, after they took Chase Young, they had 1 pick on the 2nd day, I think. Maybe they had another pick late. But they did not have a 2nd round pick. They traded it to Indy last year to move up and get Montez Sweat. And they took Antonio Gibson, which is a total luxury pick, right? I mean, they
totally, yeah.
And this is a rebuilding team. So Antonio Gibson, it seems like there's a willingness there to fit him into a non-traditional role in an offense, and they announced him as a running back. But I think Carolina, I like that you're just drawing attention to Carolina as an offense that could exceed expectations and create overachievers, right?
For sure.
I mean, at this point in our at the 30,000 foot preparation is figuring out which offenses, if you just can have like a 50-50 hit rate on the 2 or 3, like last year was Baltimore. It wasn't just Lamar Jackson. It was just the Baltimore's offense. Mark Andrews, even Mark Ingram, he was a 5th round pick.
He crushed.
Yeah. So looking for offenses that could greatly exceed expectations is where you're going to find that gold. And Carolina could be one. And yeah, DJ Moore. So it sounds like DJ Moore, if you're in a draft with Davis, DJ Moore is going to be the
not going to get
pick.
him.
Yeah. No, I understand. It should be fun. And, Matt Rule, another one. You mentioned Cliff Kingsbury and the kind of two sides of the coin. But, these new Coach Kings given this complete carte blanche to start to make the team in their own image. And that hopefully includes more aggressive play calling. Like you mentioned earlier about Kansas City, where, Davis, when you were first getting started doing this stuff, I remember it was still like a tug of war to say, like, that's a college offense. People say, well, sure, he did it in a college offense, but what's he going to do in an NFL offense? And now we can basically say, well, the best offense or one of the 2 best offenses in the league, and really a lot of what Baltimore's doing isn't necessarily, stick in the mud stuff. So absolutely, the idea that they're running a college offense, it's good. That's what we want. That's what we want in fantasy football, and the NFL continues to go in that direction. There's any number of directions we could. Let me ask you this, since I brought up Antonio Gibson. Any other rookies? And I know we talked about the big rookie running back. So in between the big rookie running backs and Antonio Gibson, we mentioned Justin Jefferson and being a little lukewarm on him. Are there any other rookies that you're just looking in this 1 year window, whether it's Zach Moss or Cam Akers or any number of wide receivers that you're thinking are part of your redraft strategy for this year?
Yeah, you hit on him, Cam Akers. I mean, what more would the Rams have to tell us that they don't view Darrell Henderson as a starting NFL running back? And I love Darrell Henderson. He averaged 8 yards a carry at Memphis. He was phenomenal, right? Like he seemed like a guy who was going to be very hard for him to miss. And they played Malcolm Brown, a 4th-year undrafted free agent, over him last season. And they then and the Rams are in total cap hell. They do not have a good roster. They do not have luxury picks to be spending, especially for a team that still, they're paying Goff all this money. They need to compete. They need to try and win right now. They can't be trying to punt things down to the future. And they spent a 2nd-round pick on Cam Akers, which to me basically just says, Darrell, thanks for trying. Maybe we'll play you some on 3rd downs this year, but Cam Akers is just going to be Todd Gurley.
Yeah, well, he's good too. He's good enough to do that.
Yeah, he is. He's so good.
I still liked Darrell Henderson a lot at Memphis, and I felt like there was some disconnect between what Darrell Henderson does well and what the Rams asked him to do. I think so much of last year was pulling back the curtain and seeing that Sean McVay maybe wasn't as big of a genius as everybody around the league, and everybody watching the league thought he was, and that maybe there's even some places where there's a lack of rational coaching, where we would look back at 2018 and say, or even 2017, and say there's so much rational coaching. Everybody should be mimicking what he's doing, with his formations and the way that individual formations can create these variations and things like that. And then last year, there's all this talk about, hey, Darrell Henderson in a Chris Thompson role. Okay, sign me up. Sure. Not when, where did it happen? It didn't.
It didn't happen at all. I mean, he got out carried by Malcolm Brown, and Robert Woods gained more yards rushing than he did.
Right. And even Todd Gurley, it wasn't like, well, Gurley was eating up all the running back opportunities in the passing game, because Gurley, in his role in the passing game, took a big step back. They just didn't. I don't know if the behind the scenes, it was Darrell Henderson.
Well, I think Gurley couldn't catch passes because he couldn't cut anymore. His knees were not allowing him to cut upfield. Right.
But then they didn't, in turn, run some of those plays with Darrell Henderson, who looked like he would at least have the potential to do that. And I wonder if there's some behind the scenes stuff where they just didn't feel like they could trust Henderson there's that thing with running back opportunity that I think is difficult for us to understand. That no matter how dynamic a guy is, if a coach feels like they can't trust them to do what they're supposed to do on a play, and then the zone running on the Rams offense, and this is where like Matt Waldman comes in, right?
Yeah, I heard that he just didn't understand it. That it just was too hard for him to pick it up.
Which is something that makes you wonder why the Rams would move up to draft him, just expecting that to be something. And this year, and I will say this about Cam Akers, I'm watching Cam Akers. He was another one. I don't think that he's going to be a mess as a zone runner, but I think that he was better when he had a fullback to follow. And then there's also the question of how much can we even learn from watching him behind the Florida State line. So we'll see. But we shouldn't assume the Rams know exactly what a player's strengths are and how to put them on the field and match up with those strengths. And what it all leads down to is like me still being a little bit interested in Gerald Henderson in the 7th, 8th, 9th round again.
No, so I actually think because Henderson is so cheap, you can take both of them, especially in best ball drafts. You can take Cam Akers in the 6th sometimes, and then take Darrell Henderson later.
And then we'll see about Malcolm Brown. Cam DeSilva from RamsWire had Malcolm Brown listed first on the possibility of surprise cuts. So maybe if Henderson goes in and has a good camp, if John Kelly shows that he's worth a roster spot, maybe Malcolm Brown will make that look very smart. So we'll see. But absolutely, Cam Akers might end up being the most productive outside of Clyde Edwards-Helaire, rookie running back this year. And we'll see what the Rams do. They still have some stuff to straighten out on their offensive line. That was part of the story, too, last year. Whitworth dropped off. Offensive line wasn't as good. Brian Allen, Joseph Noteboom, those guys weren't as good. And then, as you said, Davis, it ain't like the cavalry's coming when you look at their roster, which helps in some ways for fantasy because the defense also has some big question marks at linebacker. They did at least firm up the nose tackle position. All right, we're almost to 50 minutes anyway, man. So I saw, and you and I have talked about this probably more off the air than on the air, but it is interesting heady times. And at every turn, I'm not going to do a show without acknowledging that we're in one of those moments when the plate tectonics of history are in motion. You can feel it. And
definitely.
I did see. So tell me about the Skateboard March, because those two things, I mean, skateboarding kind of is activism. It already has been.
It's very counterculture for sure. Very much. You can't tell me what to do if I don't want to do it.
Well, and it's like graffiti, right? It's like taking this urban environment that was supposed to be so inert and sterile, and then drawing your own lifestyle on it, even in a way sometimes because of antagonism. Our own David Dodds. I'm sorry, I hope David doesn't mind that I'm telling the story. Because David's been around. He was like, his dad was part of that whole scene of like, he would find the places under construction. Yeah. And then they'd all hit the pools, which is just, again, that gets back to the original activist counterculture, rejecting the dominant culture, and urbanism and suburbs and things like that. So I mean, I don't think it's a secret to anybody listening to this show or that knows your work or knows my work, like where we would fall.
No, certainly no secret. Yeah.
No. So what was the experience like? How, and in the picture with the great Ray Arch in the background was just beautiful.
Yeah, it was really cool. This I'd been to a couple other protests here in St. Louis, a couple out in the burbs, and then one in the city. And I just happened to see on Instagram that this local skate shop, basically, these kids had put together Black Lives Matter skateboarding protest, and basically we just rode through downtown St. Louis. No police escort. Our escort was some dudes on like dirt bikes who would ride up ahead and go stop traffic as we all rode through downtown St. Louis, just doing the signs and the chants, everything. It was a very cool experience, just one of those where you're like, oh yeah, these are my people, sort of my outcomes. Yeah, it was a very awesome experience. That not one that I certainly would have ever expected to have, but the skateboarding community is very tied to these other communities that just get forgotten about when legislation gets made, when people are making decisions. Certainly skateboarders are no friends of the police either. I bet
Right.
all of my negative interactions with police pretty much have come as a result of skateboarding somewhere where people thought we weren't supposed to be. So that definitely goes hand in hand there. It was an awesome experience though. Definitely 10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah, it's skateboarding is not a crime, right? I remember seeing that as
exactly
before there were memes. It was a meme. I mean, it was
before there were memes, you'd see that stickered somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Stickers. We're trying to, the 7-year-old, trying to get him interested in stickers and things like that. We used to go to the Kinko's and you run off all the pages, like in the Exit to the gift shop, like when they show Spencer Ferry, like in the actual Kinko's, getting the stuff, getting ready to deface those things. And one of the other things it reminds me of, since we're on this topic, have you ever seen the documentary United Skates?
I have not. No, it
It's
sounds
good.
like something I'd be into, though.
It came out, well, and what it's actually about is the tradition in Black culture of skating rinks and roller skating. And unfortunately, like the culmination of the documentary is about how the scene, like all the roller skating rinks are closing now. And also there's undercurrents of like communities not supporting it because it was so vital in the Black community. And what's incredible about it is just the artistry, the expression, the like taking roller skating to an entirely different level. It's so cool. It's so
I could be into that. I will.
Yeah, right.
I'll give that a look for sure.
Yeah, it's fun, and there's a lot of there's so much. I mean, what I hope, one of the things I hope happens from this time, Davis. And I think we can both say, like, did you ever think you would hear the NFL say we were wrong about? They didn't say his name.
No, man. Did you? I never thought I'd hear the NFL say I was wrong. I never thought I'd see Mitt Romney at a Black Lives Matter protest. Like, I guess sort of my cynical thinking was that, we would just go on living this way, and the people in power would never be disrupted enough to care. And so it's sort of like, yes, a lot of this is terrible and it's awful that so many people had to lose their lives and, be beaten and lose their autonomy. But also it's this amazing cultural moment where like if you're a racist in the United States of America right now, you can't feel safe. You have to feel like your viewpoint maybe used to would have been popular or shared by other people. And now I think you would much more feel like, well, maybe actually I am wrong and I don't have compatriots anymore.
Well, that's the hope, right? And I mean, for everybody, we want to be able to listen. And because one of the things Matt Walden brought up when we talked about this is every single one of us, when I say we all, I mean white people, had to have a moment when someone said, no, that's not actually how it is. Like everybody had to have a moment that someone said, no, actually, that
totally.
there's a lot more to that. And so people that are coming to that moment now, it's vital that we be willing to accept apologies or take in good faith. And if we find out later on it was not in good faith, then we find that out later on. But at least initially take in good faith these offerings of, okay, we were wrong, or I want to listen. I want to learn, because some of the things I know, Davis, that we've talked about, I don't know how much we've skirted these on the shows we've done together, but certainly off the air about, structural racism and just some of the things that are woven into the dominant culture, unquestioned in this country. Because I had read a MLK quote about how he said the Negro struggle back then in the 60s is also about militarism. It's also about materialism. It's connected to all these things that are kind of the rot in American culture. And I'm afraid that coronavirus is showing where that rot.
Oh, it's showing the rot. Yeah, it's showing the rot. No doubt about it.
The lack of community, the sense of shared values, the sense of shared vision for our community. And I hope, like you said, there's been a lot of bloodshed. There will probably be more bloodshed. There's been a lot of heartache, and there's been death. And it's been a long road, right? This is where like people's like, none of this is new. None of this is new. Just happens that more people are listening and open to hearing this. And I bring up something like United Skates or any number of other things because I think there's all kinds of ways that we can do like cultural bridging, right? I mean, I think there's a lot. It's just that the thing that heals is just spending time with each other, hopefully, And we mentioned like another thing that would go along with it. Did you ever hear? Do you think you would hear the day that NASCAR said the Confederate flag is not welcome here?
Never. Yeah, I mean, it seems absurd. It feels like a moment that was so obvious that if it was going to happen, it would have happened 15 years ago. Like it feels like something ingrained, which is and so it's kind of funny. I said something on Twitter last night about being surprised that NASCAR of all the sports leagues that exist was a league that was getting their response to racial tension right. And people were like, well, it seems like you have a very low bar for getting the response right. And my comeback to that was, well, I just expected NASCAR to do nothing. I felt like their fan base was so unlikely to even care if they said anything that it would have almost been easier for NASCAR to do nothing. And the fact that they were willing to take steps to eliminate racism amongst, their fans, amongst the people that attend their events, like that was heartening to me.
Well, and what it hopefully comes down to, and there's going to be a wave of this through everything, right? Like, there's a Instagram account here. He's doing tremendous work, Mel at Midnight. And you know what they're doing, Davis? Is they're basically outing all of the restaurants and bars that have racist or sexist owners, like
owners,
yeah. And otherwise, it's something I remember back when I thought I was going to be an activist, but I lost my heart whenever I went to law school and they pulled back the curtain and you saw the game was actually rigged, and it made you think, I don't want to play that game. Anyway, we're voting with our dollars, right? And that goes all the way up from, because there's going to be a sad restructuring of our economy that's going to just trickle up to multinational corporations, and small businesses and local businesses are just going to, it's going to be a terrible, terrible time for them. But the more we know and understand, the more informed choices we can make. And there are things more important than money, right? Because like you said, for NASCAR, the optimal choice for them, or even NFL, right? Isn't this why the NFL was doing the fence sitting? Well, we don't want to offend the people. We want everyone to keep buying jerseys,
But it's no longer a tenable. The thing that I think I'm most heartened by is that it's no longer a tenable position to like hide behind the flag or hide behind police badges or whatever, because now even, white suburban moms and dads are like, this is pretty fucked up. Like this is pretty bad what's happening to people. Yeah. And that's just not a position that you could have even like what politicians in 2016 were standing with Kaepernick, it just wasn't happening. And that tide has turned, and I don't see that being a tide that's easily turned back.
No. And this is that whole, again, to quote Martin Luther King Jr., like the arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice. It gives you some sense of hope that if the truth, like the truth will set you free with a capital T, that when people see the truth, they can't unsee it. And it feels like we're in that moment, and we all can still listen. We can all still learn more, and it's still underway. I mean, this is the movement's been going on. We had to. Sometimes it gets discouraging, Davis, but then I think like we had to dislodge, totally metastasize like church and state and wealth power hundreds of years ago. Like our ancestors had to go up against monoliths, but we have to go up against, it's lightweight. It's like Glass Joe on old Mike Tyson's Punch Out. Like especially the way that some of the elements, some elements in the police are maybe trying too hard to massage incidents and things to get support. And I think people are starting to see through, like you said, just this automatic response that certain institutions are above reproach in our society and make it better. But I'm excited that you and I got to have just even this bit of conversation on it, because I know that we've had off the air conversations about this, and a lot of people, fantasy football has always had a lot of people, I think, whose eyes were open to some of these things. It's some of the reason we ended up in this, because we're like, I don't want to have a real job. I don't want to, I don't want to have to go be part of that.
I don't want to go work for the man.
Right. So you folks out there, Davis's work, and if you want to get that taste of PGA, DFS, and all the other things while we're waiting around, and Davis's football work and everything. So always pleased to have Davis join us, and everybody else out there. Thank you, folks, for continuing to allow us to not have to work for the man and just think about football and Korean baseball and golf and all these other wonderful things, folks. We try to bring you the best always, because you are the very best.